warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today for the AIA Live 2021 Environmental Wellness Dialogue. My name is Jessica Chiam, founder and managing director of Eco-Business, and I'm delighted to be your host and moderator today. Now, the topic for today is an exciting and timely one. I think we all acknowledge now that climate change poses various threats to the health and well-being of humanity. The increased impacts of extreme weather events, rising pollution, infectious diseases, and changes in food security affects both the physical and mental health of billions across Asia. As the issues around climate change gain wider attention, it is also starting to impact people's well-being. A growing stream of studies have looked into how people's emotions and life evaluations depend on environmental factors, including temperature, air pollution, infrastructure, and natural disasters. There is therefore an urgent need to inspire collective action, especially among the youth, who will be our leaders of tomorrow. We thank AIA for organizing this important discussion, and we have very distinguished speakers to share their perspectives with us today. And I'd like to introduce them now. They are Mr. Renzo Guinto, Associate Professor, Practice of Global Public Health, Inaugural Director of the Planetary and Global Health Program at the St. Luke's Medical Center, College of Medicine. We have Mr. Tim Jarvis, an explorer, environmental scientist, founder of the Fork Tree Project, and AIA Vitality Ambassador, Australia. We also have Ms. Zhang Tingjun, co-founder of the Chain Reaction Project. Thank you so much, speakers, for joining us today. I'd like to move to the topic of environment and well-being because this is obviously something very important, and that link between human health and well-being and our environment is super critical. Tim, I'd like to come to you. You're leading this very important project called the Fork Tree Project. Can you tell us more about it and the role that it's playing in environment and well-being?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Fork Tree Project. I could talk at great length, but we'll try and keep it very succinct. But the idea basically is to rewild an old pastoral property here in Australia, and in so doing, have it serve as an example to other people on the land as to what is possible for all of the health benefits, both mental and physical, that it brings for people, as well as, of course, the benefits to mitigating climate change through the carbon that the trees and plants sequester, as well as providing a sort of refuge for Australian biodiversity, which, of course, unfortunately is in free fall. We have the highest rates of species extinction in the world, bar none, here in Australia, which is not something to be proud of. So I am very proud, however, to say that AIA are supporters of Fork Tree. It's wonderful to have their support. And like I say, the name of the game really is not only to rewild the land, but to show others what is possible, be an educational resource and a repository of some of those rare species that are otherwise under real threat here in Australia, so that other landowners can follow suit and take our guidance really as a way forward.
That's really interesting, Tim. Do you have any advice, I suppose, for other people who are looking to kind of reconnect with nature or to help rewild, areas of the environment across the world?
Well, I think my first bit of advice is, think about the way you live, the way we travel, the food we eat. As Renzo said before, meat consumption has both repercussions for us physically in terms of things like cancers, for example, but also, of course, has broader repercussions for the environment. Interestingly, 50% of the habitable land on the planet is actually given over to agriculture, and 75% of that is for grazing the animals that we consume. So very evidently, there's a huge amount of pressure on the planet posed by us wanting essentially to consume meat. And of course, they are, without going into detail, big methane emitters. In fact, a cow has a bigger carbon footprint than a family car driven 40,000 kilometers a year. So it gives you an indication of what we're sort of up against. So I think, the way we live is something we can all, change for the better. The energy we consume, the food we eat, how we travel, the way our money is invested. But then in terms of spending more time in nature, I think it's a case of just getting out there and going and looking to find it. I think all intuitively we understand that you feel better, mentally and physically when you spend more time outdoors.
Absolutely. I think this pandemic has forced us to rediscover the nature and the places around us where we are. And I think that's a very relevant point. Tingjun, I'll come over to you. I mean, you were mentioning your work as a medic, and obviously, the well-being of humans and mental health, is very closely linked to the environment. What are your thoughts on this?
Obviously, Singapore is in a region that's very prone to vector-borne diseases, right? I think Lorenzo mentioned earlier. And things like dengue are on the rise, and I think as much as a lot of attention has been placed during the past couple of years on things like COVID, there are a lot of other underlying issues that have also, I think, been getting steadily worse, right? Decreasing. And I think that we do see some of that. It's not yet something I would say is hugely prevalent. I wouldn't say, oh, suddenly in our ambulances, we're seeing all of these people that are directly suffering from the effects of climate change. No. But when you talk about things like pollution, definitely when we have a lot of that haze that blows over during the burning seasons in the region, we definitely see a lot of allergy issues kicking up, conjunctivitis, people with breathing difficulties. Again, with the elderly, breathing difficulties is something that could be a death sentence sometimes for some people who may be prone to other respiratory illnesses. So we are definitely seeing that. And even down to the level as a medic in an ambulance, for sure. Yeah.
I want to turn to Renzo. You mentioned this phrase, eco-anxiety, which is something that's quite real and gaining traction globally. And it's this sense of helplessness, right? That we are living in an age where we are seeing rapid deforestation, extinction, extreme weather pattern events. And it's very easy to feel helpless because unless you're at the top of the chain where you're making massive decisions, very often it just feels like you're bearing the brunt of it. So, what is your thoughts on eco-anxiety? How do we even begin to help people address this?
I agree. It is a pretty new concept, and in fact, I think we scholars should, study it more. For instance, in settings like Southeast Asia, Singapore, Philippines, how does eco anxiety manifest in these kinds of settings, especially when the anxiety brought about by climate change is not based on what you see on television, but what you are actually already experiencing. For example, in a country like the Philippines, which is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. We need to document and to investigate how this manifests in this part of the world. But also we need to find, the solutions, the interventions that will not just reduce the anxiety, but also will help us channel the anxiety into something more productive, into something more positive. And you mentioned a while ago about the surge of eco-activism in Singapore. How can we turn the eco-anxiety into eco-activism, right? I think that is a challenge, and I think different sectors can play a role in it. Providing the platforms, the enabling environment, the opportunities for people, for everyday people, for young people to actually again convert that anxiety that they're facing and experiencing into something more productive, such as eco-activism.
I would like to thank all our speakers for such an insightful and exciting discussion. You've been listening to AIA 2021 Environmental Wellness Dialogue, and with me is Mr. Renzo Guinto, Mr. Tim Jarvis, and Ms. Zhang Tingjun.